to crime in court. This is the state's case part 45 of California versus Erik and Lyle Menendez, and we are continuing on with the testimony of Dr. Roger McCarthy. He's a mechanical engineer speaking about the ballistics, the bullet wounds, the trajectory of the bullets, I guess, is what he's talking about. Um, Also, let's see what else. He's been on the stand for multiple days. He still has a few more days to go. We are going to continue where we left off, which was the morning recess had just been taken on November 16th, 1995. So, without further ado, let me shut up about that. Please hit the like button and let us begin. All right, so the judge says, all right, we're about to resume. Let me just inquire if you have all the exhibits out that you're going to need for the next segment of the examination so we don't have all the movements of the large boards. Ms. Abramson says, let me just double check, Your Honor. I think I have all the large boards up that I'm going to need. I know they're very clumsy. I think my next large board has to do with the next shot, not this one. I have everything. Court says, okay. And how long do you think this segment will take before you get to the next one? So we don't have to move things around? She says, it depends on the witnesses. Court says, it depends on the questions. Ms. Abramson says, yes, depends on both. Court says, how long do you think? Ms. Abramson says, I may not get the others out until after lunch. I will go on to the next shot before I actually utilize the board. So court says, all right, let's have the jury out. The jury entered the courtroom and the following proceedings were held. All right, so Ms. Abramson is doing the cross-examination for Erik Menendez, and she's been crossing him for a while here because he is a very difficult witness, so we'll get through it the best we can. Ms. Abramson says, what's up right now are, Dr. McCarthy, the two illustrations. I just have to check the numbers for what you're calling shot 2. These are exhibits 252 and 253. Now, in using these anthropomorphic dummies, they don't have faces on them. Is that correct? Anatomic figures. Anatomic figures. They do not. They're just anatomically scalable, as shown. Okay. Now, in these two illustrations, did you mean to imply by particularly looking at shot 2B, the second one, did you mean to imply that the vector, the green line, is exactly placed where it must have been placed when Mr. Menendez received the head wound? No. And do you have any evidence to support the presence of Mrs. Menendez on the couch at the time that Mr. Menendez is receiving his head wound? No, nothing beyond the misting that I think Dr. Lawrence testified to. Now, you didn't ever testify to misting yourself, correct? That is correct. You didn't include misting as a theory of yours before you designed this particular shot illustration. Is that correct? That's correct. I did not pick up on it. And you heard Dr. Lawrence indicate that even he is not a blood spatter expert, so that misting is just a hypothesis for him. You heard that. I recollect his testimony about his expertise in blood evidence, but my recollection is it was more complicated than how you've just clarified it. Do you recall testifying at the pretrial hearing that, in your actual opinion, you believe Mr. Menendez's head was turned towards the right facing Mrs. Menendez when he received this injury? Towards her. I mean, as I've indicated in the figure, yes. As you've indicated in the figure, he's not facing her, he's sort of facing north, slightly northeast. Well, I don't think I testified, and I certainly didn't mean to testify in the preliminary hearing that he was facing her. I believe his head was tilted or turned toward her slightly. Now, in this illustration, you've also tilted his left shoulder. Is that correct? His shoulder line is tilted, yes. And you don't have any evidence to support that tilt, do you? That's correct. The head alone turned. Okay. And depending how far that head is turned to the right or to the left, for that matter, that would dictate the position of the muzzle of the gun, would it not? If the weapon is too long, unless he moves forward to tilt, you run out of 30 inches of blinds behind him to go straight around. So either he has to be off at an angle like that, like this, or like that. So you're pointing out that there's only 26, or as the police measured it, 27 inches between the back of the couch and the south wall or windows or doors, correct? Yes, it's pretty tight. So the shooter couldn't, there's no room for the gun, let alone the person. Well, it's not that there's no room. You've got to move his head a few inches forward. It becomes more complex to put the weapon directly behind him. So you're more comfortable with the shooter off, as we're looking at these illustrations, off to the right or off to Mr. Menendez's left. Is that fair to say? I'm not very comfortable off at the other angle at all. I'm comfortable with this angle. That's what I asked you. Yes. Oh God, he just can't answer a question. Even that angle, if Mr. Menendez's head is turned more to the right, this line starts to rotate down. As the illustration shows, it starts to come north. Yes, the end of the line does, yes. And depending, therefore, on what in fact was Mr. Menendez's head position, that would determine whether or not the shooter was, as you're trying to show it here, more behind them rather than more to his side, correct? Yes. And if his head was turned to the right, so that, first of all, if he was indeed looking directly at Mrs. Menendez, if she were still on the sofa, that would position the right side of his face parallel with the wall, correct? Closely. I mean, it would be coming in parallel. Now, where is this misting blood supposedly coming from? He has two exit indications in the right side of his face, according to the coroner's report. The coroner only finds 11 pellets in the cranium, and starting with 27, and it's a buckshot. So he's got to lose most of the pellets from the shot out of his cranium. Okay. You're aware that when they moved the body after the coroners got there, they placed him flat on a piece of plastic. I have pictures of him being placed on a piece of plastic, yes. And do you know whether or not any pellets emerged at that point? I do not. Now, if to follow what you've just said, however, if pellets are emerging from the right side of his head and he's sitting the way that you have shown him, couldn't they have hit Mrs. Menendez in the face? No, see, that would take a right turn. They didn't do that. Well, in the illustration to the left, he could have been facing straight on, don't you think? Well, then the gun is too long. So you have him facing somewhat to the right. Yeah. And then, depending on the angle of her body, if she's really there, some of those pellets could have hit her. No, no, that would require a right turn. Well, you don't know. You be him. Okay. You look as you've shown it. Right. Okay. Well, you're not sitting close enough. We have to get closer here. All right. You be him and I'm her. Boom. Boom. Then they come out of my head here demonstrating. They're going to go there. I wouldn't predict them to take a right turn into you. Well, what if I'm here? You can get in the way if you come off, sure. Okay. But yeah. Now, let's take it the other way. Let's say that in fact, well, let's just stick with this way. So this mist is going to come out the right side of the head, is that right? Yes. Given the way you've shown that, if they're coming out of the right side of his head, wouldn't you expect a little mist on the back of the couch? I would expect the mist to have, I can expect the mist to have, it would have a tough time directionally going sideways. If the pellets are emerging from the skull, I would expect them to come out with a ballistic component. So I would be looking at sort of like some of the mist could surely turn to the right coming out of the skull. Well, let me show you what's been marked and is in evidence as Exhibit 8. That's a photograph, is it not, of Mr. Menendez on the couch? Yes. Do you see the area immediately to his right on the couch, the portion that would be here? Between, you've got the figure of Mrs. Menendez here. But whether she's there or not, it would be this area here, right? Do you see any mist? No, none. Well, not that I could see. And if his face was turned in such a way that he's looking directly at her, then the mist is going to go towards the wall, correct? Well, in theory, you could rotate his head enough around so that there would be some misting towards the wall, yes. I don't want to do like The Exorcist, I just want a normal rotation of the head. If you get your head all the way around and the mist is going to go on the wall, I don't know if it would go far enough on the wall. If your face was going this way, I would expect it to come off at some angle and have a component of motion towards the wall. Is that fair enough? Do you understand what I mean? Yeah, that direction. But how far it would go, you don't know. And also the component of the motion. I just don't expect any of the mist to take a right turn or to be close. It's got a ballistic component. What does that even mean? So you haven't shown this in such a way that could explain that the only area of potential mist is at the base of the couch between her legs. A, I don't recollect that being his testimony, but B, if you look at the picture, there is evidence of splatters. The word is spatter, not splatter. What I thought Dr. Lawrence referred to on the pillars as well. If you had a misting from the head, I would expect it to be in some sort of cone coming off in this direction. Well, keep your hands there. Keep your hands there. If this is the true angle, if that's the angle, which you don't know, that's right. He was talking, this is hard to follow without, seeing what they're doing, but we're doing the best we can here. So he was talking about misting like right here to her right leg, and then right here. Uh huh. But nothing here, nothing at all, and nothing there, nothing at all. I'm not uncomfortable. This area, it's got to travel a ways. I don't recollect him excluding this area, but I wasn't here for all of his testimony. My God, how convenient, because that's just his excuse for everything. So you're free to look at the photograph. Do you see anything other than those? Oh, yeah, you see a lot of little blood droplets. Don't you remember he testified he didn't take note of the pillow or pay any attention to the splatters on the pillow? That's fine. So you don't know the direction of the splatter on the pillow. That's correct. You don't know if what's on the pillow is misting or splatters because you're not a spatter expert, right? Well, I'm not a splatter expert. I distinguish a mist from very small droplets, and a splatter is a big droplet, and clearly there are bigger droplets. That would tell you it's a splatter, not a mist. There are some splatter, they keep saying splatter, so I'm just going to read what it says. He says there are some splatters, and in addition, he was talking about the shadowing, and there clearly is, and I didn't pick up on it, but there clearly is some general darkening. On the pillow? Yes. But those are splatters or drops, right? Well, I want to distinguish the general darkening from the spatters. You described the blood that appears on the couch towards the front of the couch that Dr. Lawrence was referring to as a smear when you last testified. Isn't that true? There clearly are some smears on the front of the couch, yes. What he's calling misting now is what you called smears, correct? I don't think so. The court says, don't you have a photograph showing a close-up of that pillow on the sofa? Miss Abramson says, yes. The court says, wasn't it used during Dr. Lawrence's testimony? Miss Abramson says, well, I think I have it on one of those charts. I don't want to get a new big chart out. The court says, it's already an exhibit that's been referred to. Miss Abramson says, I'm just finding them. What I can do is I have one to show him, and then I cannot mark it because it's the same one, it's the same as the one that has been marked. I didn't pull it out. Court says, how about 209? Ms. Abramson says, Exhibit 209, 208, and 209. I have a chart that has two photographs. Can I walk through the well? The court says, let's find 208 and 209 since it's already been referred to, just getting reference to the same documents. Ms. Abramson says, that's why I couldn't find it. I already pulled it out. Thank you, Your Honor. Showing you 208, do you recognize that as a photograph of the couch? Yes. And do you see the red marks on it? A number of red marks on the couch, yes. I mean, the red circles? Yes. And do you know how those red circles got on the sofa? I do not. You weren't here when Dr. Lawrence drew those red circles on the photograph. If I was, I didn't realize that's what he was doing. Well, were you here when he was testifying about misting and smears? I was here during some of his testimony during that, yes. Here's 209. Do you recognize what that is? It's an enlargement of an area of the couch. And is that an enlargement of the area that also shows the marks that are on the cushion adjacent to where Mr. Menendez's body was? Yeah, I mean, not directly adjacent, some distance away. Like you just have to argue with everything. It's on the pillow, not the pillow that he is sitting on, but the big seat cushion. The adjacent cushion? The seat cushion on the couch. Yes, may I have this so the jury can see what you're talking about? Now, did you, before you heard Dr. Lawrence testify, identify the marks that show up on 209, which is the lower photograph, as smears? Some of them as smears, yes. Do you no longer think they're smears, or do you still? Some of them look like smears to me. And you understand, Dr. McCarthy, that no one ever sampled any of that blood, so we don't know whose it is, correct? Oh, there was a serologist that testified, and you're going beyond my ability to recall exactly what he testified to. He test exactly what he testified that he tested, and what he didn't. That was a really weird way for him to say it, so I had to clarify that. He testified to drops on the tennis shoes, and I'm not disputing you. I'm just saying I'm the wrong guy to ask. So you don't know if that blood has been identified or whose it may be, correct? Which of the two individuals that is correct? Or any individuals for that matter. You don't know that's blood. In fact, would it be fair to say you don't even know it's blood? I guess in the final analysis, can I say with absolute certainty it's blood? No. So you can't say with any certainty it's not. We're all assuming it's blood for the sake of these decisions. When you say not with any certainty, that's too strong. That's an inappropriate use of the word. Inappropriate. We have some reasonable biases to assume or to infer that it is blood, but we cannot know that with certainty. Unless you tested it. All right. If the red stuff, which we have all been assuming is blood, which I still assume is blood, had been collected and analyzed, however, then we'd have certainty that it's blood, correct? Oh, yes. If it is. Yes, I mean, it's as close to certainty as you can get. I would have that struck. That's I don't think that's a good answer. All right. Anyways, looking at this photograph, it does appear, based on the way Dr. Lawrence marked it and what's observable, that there is not, for example, blood beyond what's shown. In other words, to the left of what's shown in 209 on the seat of the couch, correct? His circles do not continue to extend. There's clearly evidence of blood beyond that. Well, there isn't contagious blood. There's little bits and pieces, correct? In the way I would use the word contagious? Not contagious, sorry, contagious. Your statement is correct. And there doesn't appear to be, well, there's certainly something that matches the darkness of the color of the areas of saturation that appear in 209 anywhere else on the seat cushion as it appears in 208, correct? Do you agree to that? Yes, with the understanding that that 6 marker is sort of hiding an individual thing, but it's hiding a piece of tissue? Yes, correct. And we don't know whose tissue that is either, correct? That's correct. And I don't believe anyone has actually identified what sort of tissue that it is. Is that correct? I don't know that it has been identified, but that's a different question from I don't know that from I don't know that one has identified it. What? I think he's saying I don't know that anyone has identified it. I don't know what he's trying to say there. Never mind. Moving on. You don't know it has. You haven't seen anything that tells you it was identified. That's correct. I have not. And are you aware of the previous testimony in this case given both by Detective Zoller and Mr. Kuhn of the Beverly Hills Police Department that no tissue sampling or blood sampling was done from the scene? Well, first, I'm unaware of that testimony if there was such testimony given. Well, why don't you assume that there was? Objection, argumentative, object to the form of question. Court says it wouldn't make any difference if he assumed it or not at this point. Why? Ms. Amerson says, all right, let's move on. Now, so is it your current opinion that his head, meaning Mr. Menendez's head, was rotated to the right, perhaps looking to Kitty? No, my opinion has been pretty constant all along. I think this diagram is indicative of my opinion in terms of his head rotation. I think it was biased towards Kitty, but I don't think he was looking at Kitty. So his head was turned towards Kitty, but he wasn't looking at Kitty. How can you even tell where his eyes were looking in the room, sir? It's crazy. Calling the court and counsel's attention to page 35421, I intend to read lines. I'll read the whole question and answer starting at line 14. You want to read it over my shoulder? It's right here. Question: can you tell us what we are looking at? Answer: this is a contact shotgun wound to the back of Jose's skull delivered from behind at the angle indicated after I'm going to show it from this point of view. I believe his head was rotated to the right, perhaps looking at Kitty. Do you know, by the way, Dr. McCarthy, whether or not those exit defects on the right side of Mr. Menendez's head was caused by the direct path the pellets took through his skull or by ricochet inside the skull? No. Would it make any difference to your placement of the gun muzzle at the angle that you have shown it if those were ricocheted marks and not a direct line fire? No, I didn't rely on those for the geometry. So you don't show his feet in these two illustrations of 2A and 2B, do you? You don't show you don't show his feet in these two illustrations. You do, however, show them in the next 1, 3, and in one after that, 4. Is it your opinion that his feet are flat on the floor at this time? No, I don't have any opinion about the exact position of his feet at the moment the shot is delivered. And the reason the feet are not shown is, as we discussed yesterday, in terms of the table in this one shot moving closer to the sofa. What happens? The register on the Y coordinate didn't get filled. Huh? So the table hasn't rotated. But as you pointed out yesterday, it moved back 3 inches. What happened is there should have been a Y translation put in the register and it just didn't get written in the file. It's moved in all the rest. So he didn't move or all with all the different table movements and all the illustrations. That was what he was trying to explain there. Did you, previous to these proceedings, offer that opinion that his head wound to Mr. that this head wound to Mr. Menendez was instantaneously fatal? I don't know whether anybody let me express that opinion, but I do believe that was the case. So that's a medical opinion, isn't it? I guess it strikes me as an engineer. As a number 4 buckshot direct contact wound to the back of the head, no. It sort of like borders on the obvious, but I guess you could call it a medical opinion. Does this guy think that he's answering well for the prosecution? I mean, that's not okay. So, does it border on the obvious when the medical experts say, although it is fatal, you cannot ever say instantaneously rather than very rapidly? Perhaps we were discussing a distinction without a difference. Did you testify at the pretrial hearing at page 35423 that it was instantaneously fatal? I did discuss that, and I think, as I discussed, like within, a few seconds, all electrical activity in the brain ceased. And that's a medical opinion, too, isn't it? Not with 27 pellets of number 4 buckshot. So you're saying that any layman who understands 27 pellets of buckshot can render an opinion on the time of death of the application of such a round to the back of one's head. Is that what you're saying? Pretty close. I think any layman who knows the instant someone is shot directly in the back of the head with 27 24 caliber bullets will be pretty good on pretty safe ground to say that it is the instantaneous moment of death. This is not a medical expert, guys. He's not even a biomechanical engineer, which still wouldn't be able to opine to that, but he thinks he can. So here we are. The instantaneous moment of death. Is that what you're saying? You're quibbling over seconds, and not 10 of them, one or two of them. So you're talking about a range of accurate, scientifically based conclusions, Dr. McCarthy, okay? And you don't have a scientific basis to make a medical opinion, isn't that true? I'm not a medical person, and let's say you wanted to define death in terms of what transaction of all the brain cells have died. I mean, brain cells are going to be dying for several minutes after the shot. Not every brain cell is going to be instantaneously dead off the shot. It's going to be some minutes before every single one die in the way that we use dead. So you mean laymen use dead or medical doctors use dead? Layman, I mean the way maybe I don't wish to say I've survived everybody, or sorry, I've surveyed everybody on how to use the term dead, but are you done? Oh my God, I love her. She's just like, that's all a bunch of BS. Are you done? You finished with that ridiculous response? I guess. I'm just sort of sitting here. I never imagined defending instantaneous death with 27 24 caliber bullets in the back of the brain. Did you render an opinion that the function of the brain would cease immediately? Yes. And that's what you believe as a layman? Yes. And do you recall being asked at that hearing by the judge, how does the heart beat after that occurs? How long does the heart beat after that occur? And your answer, I have no medical knowledge. That's correct? Or I'm sorry, he says that's correct. And was it your testimony at the pretrial hearing at death was so instantaneous that the issue of his head had not enough time to react to the shot? I'm sorry. Well, let me put it this way. Doesn't sound like something I meant to say. Could you read that back to me, what I said? Do you believe that there are some shots that are so fast that the tissue has no time to react? That's a question? That's a question. That I was asked? I'm asking you that now. That's a yes. But I would have to qualify my answer in other words. Of course you do. In other words, we know from past experience that people, like in the Battle of Britain, were there. There were shots through people who actually got a cranial shot through and through at estimates ranging from 8,000 feet per second, who after barely had a headache. What? So it's a through and through wound with a very small fragment, but very rapid bullets pass through a wound faster than the tissue has time to react, and the actual wound cavity develops after the projectile has passed through. Is that what you believe happened with respect to any of the shots in this case? I think these shotgun bullets pellets, pellets, and that is a fair correction. The shotgun pellets are not quite up to the velocities where we say delayed wound cavity formation, where we see delayed wound cavity formation, but at the same time they start supersonic, so there would be some delay. The tissue delay to the passage. Yes. That is true even for the shot that you have called number 12, the one to the left cheek of Mrs. Menendez. There would be some delay in the tissue reaction to the passage of pellets. They would emerge because it's a contact wound. Particularly, they would emerge from the muzzle in a supersonic condition, like 1200 feet per second. This would be barely above the speed of sound, but they'd be somewhat. So, there would be time for the tissue to react with respect to that wound. The pellets, could you answer that yes or no? It's not a simple question. Well, do you believe there was time for the tissue to react to that wound? The tissue had eventually reacted to it. The question is, when does the tissue react in proximity to the projectile? Pressure waves can only travel through fluid. I'm going to object as not responsive. We're talking about shotgun wounds. The court says you're asking for his answer and he's giving it. Of course. The witness continues, pressure waves travel through fluid media at a fixed velocity. Projectiles can travel through the same fluid media at speeds greater than the pressure pulses can, so the projectile can outrun the pressure wave. The pressure wave therefore trails and the tissue reacts after the projectile has gone. Ultimately, all the tissue reacts to any projectile if it has sufficient energy velocity to disturb the tissue. Word salad. What is he even? I can't follow his answers. Do you guys? I mean, am I the only one having a hard time understanding him? Like, I understand all the words he's saying, but together they make no sense, right? Or is it just me? I don't know. He says ultimately all the tissue reacts to any projectile if it has sufficient energy velocity to disturb the tissue. Calling the court and counsel's attention to page 35, 589, these are questions having to do with starting at line 15 with the wound to Mrs. Menendez's left cheek. I'll start with the preceding question on line 9. Question. And in fact, there is a question now because the coroner has now issued an amended report in which he has indicated that due to the lack of tissue reaction, he believes it is his opinion that that shot is either at the time of death or post mortem. You're aware of that, are you not? Answer by Dr. McCarthy. Well, I don't think I disagree with the time of death. I think that the shot was at the time of death. She died, bam, then that shot was delivered. Question. No, no, no. You don't understand how antemortem the tissue reaction differs from perimortem or postmortem. Answer. I do. There was certainly not enough time for the tissue to react to that shot. The witness says, in the sense of, Ms. Abramson says, there's no question pending, Dr. McCarthy. Now let's talk about, Dr. Khan says, Your Honor, if that's not part of a question, I would ask that what counsel just read be stricken from the record. Ms. Abramson says, it's impeachment. It was read as impeachment, Your Honor. The court says it is not impeaching, so unless you want to ask him to clarify or explain the answer. Oh my God, this is ridiculous. Ms. Abramson says, you just heard what you said at the pretrial hearing that there was certainly no time for the tissue in her body to react to the shot to her left cheek. Is that still your position? Mr. Khan says, I would ask that counsel read the remaining 3 lines left as an area of inquiry. Ms. Abramson says, I don't have them in front of me right now, Judge. I mean, I can. The court says, if counsel has it, why don't you just show it to her? Ms. Abramson says, show me what it is that you want me to read. That's the end of the answer, Your Honor. I'm not going to read any more. That's the total end of the answer. The court says, let's get the explanation of the witness. The witness says, the sense of what the coroner meant was in terms of hemorrhaging in tissue. I don't believe the tissue had time to hemorrhage. I believe death was almost immediately after that chief shot. The cranium was filled, as we saw in the x rays, in the sense that the coroner meant react hemorrhage. He's right. I don't think there was time to react. Death was, again, in my use of the term, virtually instantaneous. Miss Abramson says, was death caused by the pellets going through the skin? The skin? No. Was death caused by pellets going through the other tissue that underlay the cheek in the cheek? Not Death was not caused with any infraction with the cheek wall or interaction, sorry. My brain, like I see the word, but it doesn't, yeah. Anyways, my mouth doesn't get the word out. So before death hits the brain, the skin, the cheek, and all of that tissue has already been passed through by those pellets, correct? Oh, yes. And you're saying that that skin doesn't react because the pellets are going too fast. Oh, believe you me, those things react. The, they get out of the way. So a hole is punched in. It didn't get out of the way. Well, I mean, you don't destroy the tissue, you move it out of the way. That's what bullets do. They don't, tissue doesn't cease to exist. All ballistic projectiles do is move it very dramatically and rapidly. Do you understand what tissue the coroner's talking about when he's talking about a reaction or lack of reaction to establish whether a wound is antemortem, perimortem, or postmortem? What do you think he's talking about? I don't know what exact tissue Dr. Goldman, is talking about in his revision of that particular wound, but in the sense of what you're looking for, hemorrhaging or tissue to react to damage, her skull being, on the order of a foot from front to back, and the shotgun pellets emerging at the rate of 1,200 feet per second, would go from the cheek to the back of the skull in approximately 1 millisecond. That's 1,000th of a second. After, in 1,000th of a second, her brain would be shredded by several hundred small pellets. That is the moment of death, in my opinion. All right there, buddy. So that's true of every single shotgun wound in this case. Fast pellets going through human tissue, right? Isn't that true? They're fast in human terms. Regardless, some are much faster than others. What he's talking about, Dr. McCarthy, is the abrasion ring around the circle in the cheek. And it is your opinion that on human beings with a contact shotgun wound to the head, there isn't enough time for that area around to change in reaction to the pellets passing through. Is that your opinion? No, they change and can be burned by the blast and the pellets go through. Burned? Well, yeah, the shotgun blast emerging with a hot discharge of pellet and gas. In other words, the gas propelling the pellet is still expanding outside the barrel and it's still burning. Actually, if you do a chromograph, you'll see that. So there's typically thermal damage right in a contact wound. The tissue will have time to respond to that. The tissue gets out of the way of the shot. What there won't be, if the pellets immediately spread the brain to the extent, is time for the tissue to hemorrhage, to bleed. You remember the photographs up here? There's no bleeding from this area here per se. It's just a hole. That's an engineer's explanation, isn't it, Dr. McCarthy? Yeah, I guess so. Weren't you in the courtroom when Dr. Lawrence said that the ring that's formed by a contact wound is not a burn, it's a contusion? It's when the skin has a shock wave. It's not a burn at all. It's bleeding under the skin. So it's a bruise. He was talking about the contact with the barrel, and that is a contusion. So he's talking about the cheek wound. There are going to be some parts of the cheek wound that are thermal and some parts of the cheek wound that are mechanical contact, as you've just described. So you weren't here when I asked him, is it a burn caused by heat? And he said, no, you weren't. It's part of a burn. Were you here when he said no? I can't recollect if I was here or not for the Q&A. We're not disagreeing. Who's not disagreeing? I am not disagreeing with his statements about contusion against the barrel ring. That is a separate mechanical phenomena that. Let's take a look at what you've called shot 2A. In that illustration, you can see the French doors behind the couch, correct? All right, my dog needs the blanket. She's circling. Hold on. Sorry. His answer was yes, you can see the French doors behind the couch in his illustration. So you've already testified there wasn't enough space behind the couch for someone to be holding the gun that's standing directly behind Mr. Menendez, correct? Not with his head back. I mean, you're right at the border where it's going to fit. Now, you also testified yesterday when we were talking about the spread pattern on the left elbow that if indeed it took 12 to 14 feet for the muzzle of the gun to be back from that elbow to cause that pattern, the shooter would be in the foyer. Do you remember that testimony? In response to your 14-foot suggestion, yes. Okay, even at 12 feet, the shooter would be in the foyer. Or foyer, whatever, however you want to pronounce it. Foyer. Whatever the room dimensions, we've got a scale drawing. So I don't recollect the exact dimensions. It would, at some point, he has to move out of the room. So wasn't it your original opinion, repeated in two telephone conversations with members of the defense and the prosecution in this case, that the shooters came in through the French doors? There's nothing in my reconstruction that requires an entry from either position, but I think that is more likely than walking in from the side. So you still believe the shooters came in the French door? I think it is more likely, but that's just I have no basis for that. So the French doors are 30 inches wide based on your engineer's measurement, correct? Correct. They don't open all the way behind the couch. I haven't gotten there yet. They do not open all the way behind the couch. That's correct. And one on the right, as we look at 2A, is the one that does open from the outside with a key, correct? Yes. And the other one, the one on the left, has a 2-foot slide bolt at the top, correct? Correct. Based on the photographs which you are able to enlarge on your computer, one can see that the bolt is in the mortise above. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Holding that bolt in place at the time the police take the photographs, correct? At this point in time, yes. Not at this point in time, at that point in time when the police took the photographs. I mean, we were referring to the same point in time. You are correct. So it is your theory that somehow two people with 30-inch shotguns opened both doors, the left door, the right door, you don't know, door. Objection, argumentative, object to the form of the question, rephrase the question. So they opened which door? With the understanding that there's nothing in the physical evidence that I can now corroborate the following with, I just think it more plausible that they opened the right in this view, the right-hand door, the door on the right with the handle. Even though she just totally burned you and told, let the jury know that in the police photos, the doors are locked. Fine. Which doesn't open all the way. That's all I asked was which door. Okay. So they opened that right door, that right-hand door, which doesn't open all the way. Yes. In fact, it blocks them from where the two figures that you believe are sitting on the couch are sitting. Yes. They can't go that way, right? At this point, until they close the door, that's correct. So they have to come in behind these two people sitting on the couch? Yes. And then they have to close the door. Correct. Correct? Before they can walk all the way around and out to the foyer to aim shot number one? One of the individuals of Mr. Khan says assumes facts not in evidence that the shot was fired from the foyer. Sustained. The answer is stricken. Well, the dude said that it likely had to. This, this is crazy to me the way, okay, anyways. Assuming that your conclusion yesterday that if the shot pattern dictates 12 to 14 feet there in the foyer, then in order to get shot one off, they have to walk all the way around the couch, walk across the room, out the door, and shoot from the foyer. Again, I would object to the use of multiple hypotheticals when the underlying facts have not been established. Sustained. In fact, the underlying facts are absurd, aren't they? No. It's absurd to think that they would come from behind, walk around, and these people would just remain there sitting on the couch until they got to the foyer. Isn't that absurd? No, I think it is most plausible for the following reason. I didn't ask you for the reason, what the reasons were. Mr. Khan says, may the witness please answer. The court says, the question doesn't ask for that, so the objection is overruled. Finally, Judge. Like, where have you been this whole time? Many of these questions didn't need these long winded explanations from this witness. A yes or no would suffice. But you're letting him just go on and on and on and control the courtroom and kind of undermine the defense attorney a little bit here. So finally, he overrules and says, whatever. Uh, so he allows him to not babble on and on and on. Ms. Abramson says, now you testified yesterday that you thought Mr. Menendez raised his arms up in a defensive response, correct? I believe I indicated he raised his left arm and his right shoulder dropping down and perhaps rotating. And that was in reaction to something, right? Yes. Something that he could see. Yes. Something in front of him? I believe from the angularity, not directly in front, off to his left. Off to his left at the angle that you showed? In that general direction, yes. And in a distance to produce the elbow wound? Of course. And you think that's where he reacted to seeing people? I don't think, as you quite properly brought up yesterday, that he had his arms sort of floating up in the air watching TV. So you don't think that people coming in behind them, having to open and close a door, that they reacted at all to that? They may very well have reacted to that. It's just if my children come into a room, I don't turn around. I notice my kids coming in, and they could come in from the back holding a weapon, and not necessarily either person would turn. I certainly don't turn my kids. Uh, I certainly don't turn when my kids walk into a room necessarily, certainly not behind me. Most people would turn and see who's entering a room. That's a dumb answer. So you didn't just have an argument with your kids either, did you? Objection irrelevant. Sustained. So you don't know what preceded these two people sitting in this room or that these two kids are entering it. Objection assumes facts, not an evidence that the kids are on trial. There are kids are on. Assumes facts, not an evidence there are kids are on trial. Sustained. Ms. Abramson says he used the word kids, Your Honor. The court says, all right, he's talking about his children. Ms. Abramson says, you don't know what preceded this shooting, do you? I know some things that preceded the shootings. There's a couple of dishes of ice cream on the coffee table. Are there? Well, that was a couple of dishes of ice cream. Reading Vanity Fair recently for your information about the case, Dr. McCarthy? Objection, argumentative, sustained. And let's have quiet in the audience. Somebody laughed at that because that was pretty damn good. Miss Amerson says, thank you, Your Honor. Where did you ever hear that there was a couple of dishes of ice cream on the table, Dr. McCarthy? One of those things that I guess I didn't think was controverted, but let me see if I could find a source for it. I'm sorry, I didn't bring the trial testimony with me. Nobody testified at that trial, Dr. McCarthy, that there were dishes of ice cream on the table. All right, just one moment. Do you think it was melted ice cream or solid ice cream? Objection, irrelevant. For certain, were melted. Ms. Abramson says Ben and Jerry's ice cream or another brand. Objection calls for speculation and irrelevant. Sustained. Let's see if he can find what he is referring to before we have any more types of these questions. The witness says, "Oh yeah, it's in the picture." Ms. Abramson says, it's in the picture. A couple of dishes of ice cream in the picture. The spoon is still in it. Still? Look, Dr. McCarthy, here's the picture. Yeah. Yeah. What's in the glasses, Dr. McCarthy? Objection irrelevant and under 352, it's collateral to the issues in the trial. Overruled. He testified to it, so he brought it up. That doesn't look like ice cream to you, the witness asks Miss Abramson. She says, it didn't look like ice cream to Detective Zoller, who was there and picked it up. It didn't look like anything. It was empty. Objection argumentative. The court says it was very argumentative. Miss Abramson says, sorry, Your Honor. Let's ask questions in the proper way, says the court. So you took a glass that was white stuff and a spoon and turned that into 2 dishes of ice cream, is that right? Objection, argument, object to the form of the question, overruled. I guess, I don't know why my recollection is multiple dishes, although that is my recollection, but I mean, you don't think this is ice cream? Miss Abramson says, I know it isn't ice cream. Dr. McCarthy, and you don't know what it is. Objection assumes facts, not an evidence that counsel knows what's in the dish. The court says, all right, sustained. The witness shouldn't ask questions of counsel, and counsel shouldn't be responding to the question of the witness. And the responses of counsel are stricken. The witness says, I'm sorry. Dr. McCarthy, is this how you come up with your engineering calculations? You speculate on empty glasses? Objection argumentative. The court says, objection sustained to the form of the question. You don't know what was in the glass. That's correct. It was never tested. Do you know that? I don't know that. But if there has been a test of it, I have not seen it. And whatever may have, at some point in history, been in that glass, you don't know when, if ever, or who ate it, do you? I do know, per your question, it was before. Well, it was before the police got to the scene. That's correct. How many days before? Oh, I can't tell you that. Could have been days before, couldn't it? Objection irrelevant. Sustained. You have no idea what was in this glass, or who ate it, or when it was eaten. Objection asked and answered. Overruled. Right. That's not quite correct. There was some testimony about the maid and when she cleaned up that your statement is not correct. There was some testimony about when the maid cleaned up. Yes, the frequency with which the maid visited, and I remember this, there's a vacuum cleaner in the front foyer. Yeah, there's some. Who? You didn't get the maid's testimony, did you? Or did you forget to tell us about that? I didn't get the maid's testimony. I think I was thinking, my recollection as I sit here, about the detective's interview with the maid. What interview with the maid did you get? I asked you about everything that was submitted to you. And I told you everything I got, but the question is, there's no discussion of the maid in any of that stuff. There's discussion of the maid in the testimony of Erik and Lyle Menendez concerning how often she worked there and when she worked there and where her room was. Do you remember that? Again, I don't have a specific recollection or source or I would cite it to you. However, that discussion by them of the testimony of the maid did not appear in the page you told us you got of their testimony. Objection assumes facts, not an evidence. Sustained. That's interesting. So he only got some portion of their testimony. He didn't get it all from the prosecution, and for whatever reason, that part wasn't there that he's talking about. Ms. Abrams, or at least that's what he testified to. In any event, Dr. McCarthy, it is your belief that there's been testimony that the maid would have picked up a glass if she had seen it. Mr. Khan says, I would object under 352 at this point. The court says, we're getting a little far afield here. Move on to something else. So your theory that the guns were brought into the room through the French doors was dependent on there being 2 dishes of ice cream on the coffee table? No, not in the least. The reason I tend towards that theory as anything else is not responsive. Mr. Khan says, objection. The court says he answered no, and I think that was the answer to the question. Finally, Judge, you're seeing it. Thank you, Your Honor. You read the testimony of Erik and Lyle Menendez where they indicated how they entered the room, did you? If it's contained on the pages I read, yes, I read it. And they certainly didn't testify that they came in through the French doors, did they? Objection calls for hearsay. Sustained. You're not basing your theory that the shooters came in from behind these people with these two 30-inch shotguns on anything that you read of their testimony. Isn't that true? I really don't have a theory either. I just say I think it's more likely. There's nothing in the evidence that compels a particular direction of entry. Well, you think it is more likely that people came in behind and then went, but that shot number two wasn't the first shot. That's also your theory, correct? Correct. Now, I want to show you 295 again. Before we go on to the next shot, well, let me ask you this, Dr. McCarthy. The way you've laid this out, shots 1 through 12, are you assuming that each shot was separately fired? No. There could have been simultaneous shots then. Yes. And in fact, did anyone ever give you either the testimony or the interviews with the ear witnesses, the people who heard it? What I have been given is what I indicated to you I've been given. Well, did anyone give you, or are you aware of what it is that various witnesses said they heard at the time of the shooting? As I sit here, I don't recollect any testimony from anybody about what they heard. And you weren't given any interviews with witnesses, people who lived in the neighborhood, indicating what they heard. Is that correct? I don't recollect such material, except to the extent it's contained in the material I have been given. Whether or not you've indicated it doesn't contain it. Is your answer you haven't been given it? I don't recollect any. Now, in this sequence, you haven't figured out which one could have been simultaneous, have you? We can go through on a shot basis. There are some that could have been close. There are others, obviously, to the extent I postulate she moved, those couldn't have been instantaneous. Well, let's take a look at 295. You see the top picture on 295 in the middle? Yes. And that's a picture that shows Mr. Menendez on the couch and the French doors behind him. Yes. And your shot 3 is what you call a missed round through the French doors. Yes. So you've provided two views of that, provided two views of each shot. Right. And the two views of that one area or of that one are 3A, which is 254, and 3B, which is 255. Mr. Lemon says, I'll do it. Ms. Abramson says, I want B in front of A. Now, just to look backward for a moment at 2. For 2, you have Mrs. Menendez sitting on the sofa. For 3, you have her standing up. Is that correct? In the figures depicted, yes. But you don't know that she already stood up before shot 2 was ever administered. You don't know that, do you? Well, with certainty, no. But so you've answered the question. Now, with respect to 3, you have Mrs. Menendez standing and facing in a particular direction. You have her shoulders squared to a particular direction, correct? Well, the figure does, yes. You put the figure there. The figure didn't get there by itself, did it? Or right? That's correct. And that's an arbitrary positioning of you, is it not? Yes. Or by you, I should say, not of you, by you, an arbitrary positioning by you. Yes. With respect, however, to that trajectory, that is not an arbitrary positioning, is it? It is not. So you are very definite that that trajectory is the one that fired when you're calling round 3 through the French doors. Yes. And that puts whoever is shooting that to the right of the coffee table. Anywhere along that vector, I can't put them, well, all of that, most Most of that vector is to the right of the coffee table, but the shooter's not sitting in Mr. Menendez's lap when that's fired. No, but he could have been standing very close to his legs. In any event, still to the right of the coffee table, on the right hand end to be sure. Okay, to be sure. Can you draw a line on 295, this photograph, that would show that vector? Not as good as the computer did, no. The computer didn't draw that line. You said that line was an artifact that you could put wherever you wanted. Oh, I could put it, but it did draw it. The computer does a much better job than I do drawing. It may, but the computer can't draw on my photograph. Can you draw a line on that photograph that would show it? Not as I sit here with your photograph is a wide angle and I can't draw the appropriate angularity in a wide angle picture by that I would be comfortable with. Are you serious? You can't draw a line? Well, the problem is we can't print from your computer right now, right? You didn't bring a printer? Well, you are right. I did not bring a printer. So you can't draw it on the computer and print it so that the jury could see it. That's what I did. I'm asking you to do, that's your illustration where you made certain decisions. Yes. The photograph, however, is what the police saw. You'll agree to that, will you not? Yes, but the angularity, the way you have to draw a line on a wide angle picture is different than you can. First of all, the computer takes care of all the isometric distortion and everything else when it draws. If I would lay a line down on the wide angle picture, I've got to get the isometrics right. A wide angle lens makes angles look different, but predictably so. It's not impossible. You just can't go around throwing lines on wide angle pictures carelessly. You told us before the lines you've thrown on these illustrations are not absolutely definitively the line. Okay, my dog is screwing up my computer. Is not definitively the line on fire. Didn't you say that? I mean, not exactly those words, but the remaining evidence won't permit me to pin down these angles precisely. If that's your point, you are correct. Well, would you then, according to your vector on 3B, that line crosses, that looks like it comes very close to Mr. Menendez's right shoulder and then crosses the back of the couch, correct? Comes in the vicinity of his right shoulder, yes. Can you put a mark on that photograph where you think it would be as it crosses the back of the couch? I'm comfortable pointing out the connecting points in the scene. I mean, did you take something that will write on that? Yes, I'll point out the defect in the blinds behind. And draw the line from the defect, if you will. That's what we don't hold you to perfection. At least draw it back to the couch the way the angle won't be as important. This way, that way, the angle won't be as important. Mr. Khan says, I would object given the limited limitations specified by the witness. The court says, well, if the witness says he can do it, he can do it. If he says it cannot be done with that photograph, then he doesn't have to do it. Miss Abramson says, perhaps we can find another one that it can be done. Why don't you do this one? It's a bigger version of the same thing, and you can have it down in your lap. The witness says, I'm not going to draw the line, but there is a defect, and we can all see the defect. I would like you to try to at least indicate some points along this line, at least the point of where it's crossing the couch, even if you don't want to bring it out to the table because you've got a solid object. The couch will show up. Because of the angle of this photograph, if I draw a line on this diagram, I'm going to look like it's going to look like this shot's going through his head. If you took a view from this angle, you'll see it comes close but misses, as this diagram shows. Just show as best you can to the back of the couch, which doesn't take you to his head where it would be. Mr. Khan says, given the limitations testified to by the witness, I would object under 352. It's not going to accurately portray. The court says, overruled if the witness feels he can do it, if he says he can't. The witness says, I'm going to circle the defect on the door, but I can't draw a line accurately without the aid of the computer because I can't make the isometrics come up. You can't draw a freaking line, buddy. Ms. Abramson says, Can you use the computer over the lunch hour to show you that line and then put it on that you have that photograph in your computer? The very one I can't manipulate this photograph in my computer. This is in your computer. The only way you can rotate angles is to build these objects in the appropriate software and then move it, literally building all these three-dimensional objects, moving the scene. That's what I tried to do here. Let me just ask you this. Do you think it's crossing the couch over here? No, closer to the head. Here? To the left of his head, obviously. Somewhere here? Yes, as the diagram shows. Can we put an X there, at least where you just indicated it's crossing the couch? Closer to the head. As close to the head as you feel as close as you feel is the best you can do. I will oval an area since once again from the angle I can't be precise. Fine. So you've put probably too much shine, but put it down. You've shown an oval around the defect in the blinds and the window, correct? Yes. You've shown another oval in the area near his head. Right. Now I want to get chart 3. By the way, Dr. McCarthy, what's this just beyond the oval that you drew? I don't recollect, and I can't tell from that photograph. Do you want me to blow one up and look? No, I have one blown up. Okay. Did you ever notice the marks on the back of the couch tearing the fabric? Yes, I did. And did you associate the tearing of the fabric and the marks of the back of the couch with that round that you say is a full round that went out the window? No, I didn't. It's outside the trajectory that you've drawn, isn't it? I think it is. I think it's not part of that tight group going through the window. Now, you testified that you believed that tight group going through the window was oval because it was shot at a bias. It was shot off to the side, not directly lined up with the window, correct? Not perpendicular. That's correct. But it's true, is it not, that if a shot column is interfered with, if part of it hits an intermediate object, that can change the scrape of the scatter. It's going through an object. Yes. And you, of course, don't know exactly what the shape of the round is in however many bunches they emerge from the barrel of the shotgun here, because the tests you did don't tell you that, correct? Outside of this approximately circular, you don't know the exact shape as a function of distance. That is true. Now, if this column had, in fact, not come from the direction you indicate, but from more straight on and had intersected with the top of the couch, that too could distort its shape, could it not? A shot intersecting with the top of the couch may acquire some distortion. And, basically, there's no question pending. Let me just let me just try and get out of the way and show you these photographs. The one in the upper right is the one we were just making or marking in a larger form, correct? No, that's a subset of the picture. All this has been cropped. Right, I mean, it's the same photograph. No, it may be a different photograph actually. It shows the same items, though the whole of the window, it shows Mr. Menendez on the couch, shows Mrs. Menendez. It's a different photograph. That's right. You want to hold that, just point out the defect. I want to make sure the record is clear. You and I were talking about the same thing on the back of the couch. It's about here. Fine. Outside your oval, in fact, look at this photograph, the one farther down. This has to be marked, Your Honor, 302. The court says the board with multiple photographs is 302. And this board has the number 3 up in the right-hand corner. This photograph down here, Dr. McCarthy, which is just a photograph of Mr. Menendez, it shows the defect right here. That's right. That's not in the line with the hole you've got going through the window, which is here, correct? It's not in line with my direction, which would be like, sort of here. Can you draw the line here? You just showed it? That's better. Good enough. Well, I can draw a line. Now, let me think what mistake I could make by doing so. Oh, I wouldn't worry about one mistake. Oh, but I worry about every mistake I hear about. I won't ask you to do it now. Over the lunch break, you can decide the defect we're talking about is there. Here is a further close up which also shows the defect. A little bit of tearing. If you look at this photograph, it shows the defect goes across the top and back of the couch. Do you see that? These little tufts that are torn out? I'm sorry. I'm having trouble seeing what you're pointing to. Why don't you step down? And I'd ask you to step down and examine the top photograph and the one beneath it and see if you see what appears to be tears in the couch fabric. There's tufting down there. He points to it. You've alluded to, and you can see them in this photograph too. I guess that's definitely tufting here. I guess where I'm reluctant, there appears to be some damage here and there's tufting here. Okay, thank you. You can resume the stand. None of your illustrations deal with the damage to the couch. Is that true? That's correct. Now you also indicate that you received a copy of a diagram that Mr. Clark Fogg of the Beverly Hills Police Department took, rather made, quite recently. Do you recall that in the diagram showing you the French doors and the tree? Yes, yes, I do. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be dunce. Okay. Now, it's your testimony that the hole in this is the western door, is it not? Yes. It's your testimony that the proof of the accuracy of this particular shot, and according to your hypothesis, are the pellet marks that appeared on the tree, right? I will say they're conformatory. I placed the shot before knowing the exact position of the tree, and it worked out 23 degrees perfectly. So you knew there was a tree, though? Yep. You saw the pictures of the tree? That's right. Before you placed this shot, you saw a tree that appeared to have pellet defects? That is true, but I didn't use the tree in the placement of the ray for the shot. I did that on the basis of ovality. But when you placed it based on the ovality, it becomes right out and intersects the tree. And you ignored, for those purposes, never enough organization. I'm putting up what's 265 in evidence, and I'll do them next to each other. Next to it is number 18. The court says, what's the one above it? Miss Abramson says that the one above it, good point, Your Honor, it's number 17. Number 17 shows that this isn't going to hold. 17 shows both French doors from the exterior. Yes. And if I were the photographer who took 17, the tree would be behind me and perhaps off to the right. Probably just behind you. You're standing off to the right when you take this shot. You may be standing in front of the tree. Okay, and what is the distance, do you know, from the hole in the west door, which is the one in the left, to the trunk of the tree? In the direction toward the photographer, it's 31. 31 feet. You're reading from something? The diagram, the one we talked about. Mr. Fogg's diagram? Yes. And apparent in both the large photograph on top and the one here on the right, which is 18, is that there's also a hole in the east door, correct? A broken window and part of the glass broken out, yes. And there were pellets found below that, correct? Inside? Inside, yes. There are pellet defects in the slats in front of that hole in the east door. A few, yes. It's fair to opine, is it not, that hole was caused by pellets? Yes. And you can see from, did you find me you're looking at a copy of, this is the exhibit right now. Yes. Number 278. Yes. You're looking at the same thing. Yes, I am. Number 278 is the drawing that Mr. Fogg made, correct? Correct. And according to this drawing, pellets coming out of either of those holes could have hit the tree. I don't know that he testified to that, but if he had considered the vertical angulation, he wouldn't have testified to that. If he did, which I have no evidence, Ms. Abramson says, move to strike, Your Honor, as non-responsive. Objection sustained. The answer is stricken, but perhaps you could clarify what you mean in your question. Okay. I'm asking you about the diagram, which is all that's in front of you, correct? Yes. And according to that diagram, pellets coming out of both of those holes could have struck the tree, depending on their angle. Objection misrepresents the diagram. Ms. Abramson says it shows it too clearly. The court says, is the question, assuming a projectile went through the holes in the window as shown, it could have struck the tree with such velocity? Is that what you're saying? Ms. Abramson says, I'm asking doesn't the trajectory vector lines coming out of both windows wind up on the tree? The diagram just shows the geometry in the horizontal plane only on the tree in relationship to the tree, to the two defects. God, talking this long sucks. I don't know how people who talk for a living do this. And it shows a line from each of those holes in the door that connects to the tree. In the horizontal plane only, yes. And a line is what you were projecting. That's what your vectors are. A line between a hole and a tree. Correct. Your Honor, I'm about to go to the next one, so all right, we'll take our recess, resume at 1:30. Don't discuss the matter with anyone, and don't form any final opinions about it. We'll resume at 1:30, so they're going to lunch. So that is where we're going to end today's stream. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, let me know what you think. Do all the YouTubey things, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye now.